Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you choose so, you can leave a comment. We like them all, we check them all out, respond where it's appropriate, and additionally check out our website, www.legendthesuperstitionmountains.com. Bark notes, all kinds of other stuff's up there. And November 3rd, 4th, 5th, Dutch Hunter Rendezvous at the Don's Camp in the Superstitions. If you don't know where it's at, check our videos under the Legend of the Superstition Mountains stuff. You'll find one where me and Frank did the drive-in and we go to the camp and you get to see the layout and everything. But everybody's welcome, so if you've seen this, you got your invite. So quit asking me for invites because you got your invite. I'll do some reminders for certain people, but for the most part, if you heard this, you're more than welcome to come out. That being said, Jack Sanfelice has a new book coming out. Don't know the name. He never called me back. Don't know when it's actually coming out, though. It's at the printers, but it should be before the end of the year. And we'll try to get a hold of Jack and get more information on that. And we'll do an episode of Chasing Legends on his new book to some degree, or maybe sit down with Jack and talk about his new book. That being said and done, we move into today's topic. This one's actually very recent. I get messages, emails, and things from various people. And this person sent me something about a month ago. And I kind of put it to the side and so forth. He did follow up. He's like, please don't tell anybody who I am. I'm thinking about coming out to the rendezvous if I can make it back out this fall. He was actually had a 2-week vacation, decided to come out to Phoenix from California. And while out, he wanted to go stay out along the Peralta Trail. He said he didn't want to stay at Lost Dutchman State Park or like an RV park or anything like that. He had a small trailer and a truck, and he said he just wanted to kind of be out away from people. And he found that off of Peralta Trail, going up on the turn, just before the Lost Gold Mine Trail, there's a few spots to the left you can pull off onto. And he said he parked there, figured he'd stay 4 or 5 days there, try to unwind, decompress. So he said he pulled in, he got everything set up. He said he didn't really know the area and anything. He's watched the videos and stuff, and that's what kind of lured him out there. But he said even then he never bought a map or anything. He said he bought a couple books. He hadn't really read them yet. So he figured while he was there, he'd go through the books, kind of sitting around the camp during the day. Planned on a couple hikes that he'd seen we'd talked about. So he said he got in, set up his camp in one of those little areas you can do. It's kind of up on a little kind of raised area before you get to the Lost Gold Mine Trail. He kind of sat there. The first day, he said, he got there, he went and just set up camp, hung around camp, planned day 2 to go up to Fremont Saddle. So he said he was camping that night, and while he was camping, he could see lights. And he said it was kind of north of him, and he's looking out. And he said he figured it was flashlights. And he was watching them and watching them move around for a while, and he figured, oh, there must be some campsites over there. And he didn't really know anything about the area, so he said he just kind of saw it, didn't think much of it, just figured it's other campers. Next day he gets up, goes out to Fremont Saddle, goes up Fremont Saddle, did the overlook and all that, which we'd done a video of. Said he had a really good time, took my suggestion of going off to the south, east a little, so you get that view of into Bluff Springs Mountain and Needle Canyon and so forth. He said he kind of enjoyed that as a side trip. He said he's not in the shape to make Cave Trail. He was pretty much done. He knew he had all downhill from there. He didn't want to try to do the Cave Trail and out or back or however he was going to have to do it. So he took the trail, came out, went back to camp. Said he was absolutely just literally thought he couldn't move, thought, man, I might have to spend the next day in camp. He said that was a lot. But as he sat down, he had dinner and the sun's going down, and he said he turned his chair every day when he got up. he'd face east and watch the sun come up over the mountains in the day. But as the day, about midday or so forth, when he got back to camp after that second day, he'd turn his chair to the east to watch the sunset, because you don't really get it in your eyes. Once it starts coming around the main mountain, it's actually just really, it silhouettes the mountains of the Dayside Cliffs. So he sat there, thought, this is beautiful, beautiful view. Thanked me over and over, saying, man, I would have never probably taken this trip or went to a spot like that, but what you guys have showed us, you're welcome. So he said again, he's sitting there and he sees all these lights, and he says there's probably 7 or 8 lights, flashlights, and saw all these people moving around. And he thought, well, I drove down to the Peralta trailhead, did my hike, I didn't see anything. I saw that, so he thought the second day, he thought, well, I'm going to do, it looks like an easier trail. I'm going to go out and walk for an hour or so down this Lost Gold Mine trail and just kind of go out and come back. And he said I wasn't adventurous enough to think I could just bushwhack back to my camp. Okay. So he went down. When he was down there, he was looking around and thinking, well, I couldn't see anybody down in here. It's too low. And he was kind of like, went down the Lost Gold Mine. As he came back, he looked over and saw a road to his left. And he said, I was kind of curious, trying to figure out where that went. So he said, I walked up it, not sure how far it was going to go, figured I'd walk for 4 or 5 minutes. And he said, I saw this gate, and it said the Dons on it. And he said, I was really kind of thrown off and realized, oh, this is the Dons camp where they hold that rendezvous. So he said, I approached the gate, walked up there, and he said, I'm looking out. And he said, I could see down to the lower camp and stuff. And he said, well, I figured I must be seeing people out in the Dons camp. There must have been someone out there the last couple of nights, and they packed up and they left because there's nobody out there, nothing he could see. He said he never went through the gate because he was kind of worried. He thought, well, I don't want to trespass or cause any problems and all that. So he said, I just kind of stayed outside, looked around a bit, went back down, went back to camp. He said that night again, he eats dinner, and he's kind of like planning his trip the next day. And he looks down over and he sees the lights again. And he says, it's just like random lights everywhere. He says it kind of like people are following people around, and then lights are drifting out. He said, I kept looking over, and he says, it's really hard at night. He said, even though I had some idea how far that camp was, he said it was really hard to figure out if that's what I was looking at. So he said he'd watch it for a while and they'd disappear, and then a little bit later he'd see some lights again. He says, he says, you're too far, but I can just kind of see the lights moving around. So he says, I figure what I'm looking at is people with flashlights walking around. He said, I'm wondering if someone's down in that lower camp or something, or someone's messing around. I didn't see any vehicles. So he put a kind of mental note that I'm going to have to go down there in the evening and see if anybody's down there. If they're set up, if it's some of the Dons, he said it could be Wayne. So he figured he'd go down, just there wouldn't be a problem, he figured, with saying hi or anything. So that, he got to sleep that night. Next day he said he did the Wave Cave, the Apache Kid Cave. But I didn't want to correct him, and kind of like I'm just so over trying to correct people on that. But he wanted to do that trip. He said he did that. By that point, he said his legs were gone. He said that trip took him twice as long as he thought because of how tired he was from the previous 2 days of hiking. He said those 3 days of hiking was the most hiking he's ever done in his life. But he said he had a great time. So he said he did that, got some pictures. He said, of course, I really didn't get a good selfie of myself on the wave. But he said, no, I had a great time, and I came back down. Got to the vehicle. He said he was pretty lazy. He said I drove the Peralta trailhead, the Lost Gold Mine trailhead, and the Apache Kid Cave area, the Kearney Springs trailhead. So, but then he drove back and got back into his camp. So that day he used up way too much time. So he got back and he actually fell asleep. And when he woke up, the sun was going down because it gets dark. Once it starts to get dark there, it'll start getting dark fast because the sun goes behind the mountain. So he had dinner, and he was kind of looking out, watching. He saw those lights again. And he said, I'm super, super tired, but I'm going to have to, it's not that far. And he was kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to walk down and check out who it is. And then he decided he's so worn out. He said he started to walk out and then came back, got his truck, drove it down, drove it up, but parked it in the parking lot. He said there was nobody in the parking lot when he got there. He got out, walked up to the top, no lights anywhere. And he looked around and he looked down what he could in camp. He said he did go through the gate, and he kind of stood up on the ridge. He said, I didn't go any further than probably, you know, the sign that says, welcome to the Don's Camp. He said he just kind of looked over and he was looking down in. He said, I couldn't see a light. I couldn't see any. He said, I was looking up and around, and I just thought, man, what am I seeing? You know, this is probably the most elevated spot. It gets more elevated as you get maybe up on the slopes up to Peralta Trailhead. But he said he couldn't figure out what he was misjudging or judging. So he got back down, got in the car, went back, or truck, got back, stayed down for the night. And he said this whole thing was interesting, but he said it wasn't unnerving. He just figured either someone's messing around in the camp or there was someone camped there and he just couldn't see them. He said he did notice there's like the different areas of the camp. There could be someone somewhere and you just didn't see him, and then the kids get out with flashlights for a while. And he figured that had to be what it was. So I went down. He said that next day he decided the last couple of days he was just going to chill at camp. And totally, he said, I'd done enough hiking. I thought about doing some more. He did think about going around to Miner's Needle out towards Castle Rock, Spanish Graveyard. And he said at that point he realized he was really sore. He didn't want to be taking off and heading for home, really sore. So he thought, you know what, I'm just going to sit around camp, enjoy the air, enjoy everything, read these books. And that's all he did. He said, I did that all day. Nothing really happened. He said that evening he finished dinner, and once it got really dark, he's sitting there at his campfire, looks over and sees the lights. And he kept watching it, and he said it would just be like people were chasing each other, and then he said they'd just scatter out. And he's like, okay, something's going on over there. So he said, I can't keep my eye on it the whole time, but I'm going to walk down there this time. Because if they see the headlights, maybe that's what it is or something like that. So he goes down, he walks down to the Lost Gold Mine parking lot, and then he goes up the little road. And he said he got up there, and he could see down in the lower camp then. He said there were no lights on the upper part, which confused him, because he said, how would I see the lower camp from where I was? He said, I shouldn't have been able to see any of that. So he figured whoever had been there had been up in the upper camp, and he's still thinking kids or someone's playing around. So he said he went in, and he's being real careful. He said there was enough light that he didn't need a flashlight, but he said he was going very slow because he said it was very dark. And he was deathly scared of snakes. So he kept thinking he was going to run into snakes, which that would be a good time of year to run into them in the evening. But he said he worked his way up, and once he got over by the amphitheater, he could look down, and he saw these lights. And he said it still looked to him like people running around with flashlights. So he figured it's got to be kids. He can't really see the camp that well, and he doesn't know the layout of the camp. So he's walking around, and he's looking, and he says, well, I'm going to go back and walk down there and say hello because someone might see me. So he went back to where the driveway is. He went down the driveway. He said he wasn't familiar with the camp. Remember this. So he got down, and he said there was a couple buildings, and he said one was like what you guys, I think, call the Big Ramada. He said it was a big open, but he said it was very dark in there. And he said, but there was no light. But he could see the lights uphill from him. And he could see them kind of moving around a little. And he said, but I couldn't see any reflection of people. And he said there was no noise. There was no footsteps, no laughter, nobody talking. So he went by the bathrooms and started to head that hill. And he said as he did, the lights moved up and towards up more. So he kept walking that way very carefully, trying. He said the crazy thing was, while he heard no sound, it sounded like he was an elephant in the jungle stomping on things. Because he said, I could hear myself walking, but I couldn't hear anyone else. And he said, now I was getting a little kind of like, what the hell am I seeing? It seemed awful bright, but I can see the lights, but there has to be people there. He went up and he got to where he said, there's a little building, it's a low building. It was kind of off to my right, and there was a little open, like he said, it looked like a souvenir stand or something under this huge boulder. He said this boulder is like just enormous, like 2-3 stories high. And I said, I know exactly where you're at. He said before he got up there, he could see the lights go around, and then they just dissipated. And I knew, because you go around there, there's a trail that goes back around there. So he was like, yeah. He said, I didn't know that, so I started moving up, and then I saw this kind of like it goes around that corner. And he said, but I couldn't see any light. I couldn't hear anything. And he said, at that point, He said he felt like nothing but like cold in his stomach. He said, I felt really weird. And he said it could have been just the fear of not knowing where you're at. You don't know your surroundings. But he said there was not a single sound. I didn't know where that led. So he said as he was shining his flashlight, it seemed to not go as far suddenly. It seemed to be like he couldn't figure it out. Now, one of the things on that I'd like to say is you're going around there. That's kind of like a turn all the way through. And what it could be is as he's shining the light's going around that boulder, and as it's going out, and it's very thick in there. You're like almost in a tunnel of boulders, the large boulder on one side, and then boulders and thick brush going around. He said the light just seemed to die out. And he said my battery was just as strong, but it was like the light didn't want to reach. I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy, but I figure it was an optical illusion of the space he was in. So he said he kind of took a step, and then he just started backing up. And he said, I backed up all the way back to that road that I came down on. He said, it took a long time. He said, I very carefully kept taking steps back, keeping my eyes in front of me. And then I'd look behind me and then keep looking in front of me, because he said, I just felt there was something wrong. And he said, but I never saw a vehicle. He got back down that area. He clicked on his flashlight before he went up the road. He flashed the light around. He said, I never caught anything like a vehicle, anything. He said, I was just looking around. And I know there's a couple people that'll go out and stay there occasionally, but they usually will park in the upper camp, and even if they're the lower camp, you'll see the vehicle or something. So he said he kind of came down around. He ended up getting turned around a little. I think he went on the west side of the big Ramada coming down, because he said it didn't seem like he was in the same spot, and everything seemed in the wrong place. But he got down. He said he was completely disoriented, but when he kind of saw the road, he flashed his light and saw the road going back up the hill, so he felt better. He said he even backed up that for the most part. Got to the top, got down. He said once he got to his car and was driving away, he felt fine. And then he felt silly. He said, I felt completely silly, like that was the dumbest thing. Why was I so scared? I should have went around that corner. I feel like a freaking 2-year-old. What was wrong with me, all this? But he said, when I was there, he said, it was ice cold. I just felt like there was something wrong. So he got back to his camp. He said nothing bothered. He said he felt really stupid for the way he had felt, which he at first messaged me about this, and then we talked on the phone. And on the phone, I did tell him, I said, but if you're in a spot totally disoriented, don't know the layout, and that place could be a bit of a maze, and there's so much there that you can turn a corner. If you don't know it, you're kind of like looking around going, why do I keep running into buildings? Definitely at night without the flashlight, and then when you turn the light on, it's only going to catch so much of it. It's going to seem very, very disorienting. So he said he got back to camp, got up the next day, and the next day when he got up, he said, I'm going to go down and check because it was such a weird thing for him. So he said he drove down, he drove up to the gate, got out, there's still nobody there. He said he walked in, walked down, he got down there. He literally retraced his paths to kind of look around. He said he could kind of make out a couple places where he stepped. He didn't, he said, he says, I don't know how to see if people had been there. He said, the fire pits definitely had been cold before, but he said he checked the big Ramada and stuff. It didn't look like any sign anyone had been there. He got up for the big boulder, and he said, I got there, and I felt kind of an anxiety about going around. He said, I never made it. He says, I don't know where that goes, but he said, I felt that anxiety again. And he went in and said, I started to turn the corner. I could see back. There was an opening to the right. There was more boulders, a lot of brush. He said it was really thick. And he was just looking back in there and saying, I don't know where that goes. I don't know what kind of goes on in there. But he said that's where those lights went. He said that last night, because that was the last day there, he checked that out, got back up, figured he'd kind of try to get a hold of me and ask me, kind of, did I know if anybody had been up there? He got back to his camp. He spent his last night there. He said he looked out and saw the lights. At that point, he didn't care about the lights. He said, I watched them for a little while moving around. And he said, the best way I can describe it is like if you had kids with flashlights, people just running around camp. And he said, I know you guys don't have fireflies, and there's no way I would see a firefly from that distance. And he said he even thought about, was he misjudging the distance? But there was no one at any time he ever saw between him and that area. So he thought, no, it had to be over in that upper lot that he was seeing lights. But he said everything seemed like an illusion, like a weird dreamscape to him about the whole thing, because none of it really made sense. So he packed up the next morning. He said he had a great time. He said that was cool, having some sort of weird adventure. And then he contacted me. And he asked me, and I told him, I said, I don't know of anything or why or who or what or where or when. I checked around. The people I thought might have been out there, there was no one out there. And it was, he said, there was anywhere from 7, 8, 9 lights. So that means there'd be 7 or 8, 9 people. So you would think there would be a larger group. So there was no one anywhere camped between him and Peralta Trailhead at that time. So he didn't know where they were coming from, where they could be. He said he never saw them up towards the Daysite Cliffs. It was just in the camp area. And that's what made him think always in the camp. So it's a great story. The great part about the story is it just happened just a couple months ago. And I was kind of holding it, and I'm thinking, we could tell that at October, or we could tell it at the rendezvous. But at the same time, I think he deserves that in case someone was out there to say that. I've never seen anything. I know where he's talking about. I'm very familiar with it. It's actually during Discovery Camp, the area where I sit back and hide and smoke all the time. They have, the Dons have a graveyard set there. It's not a real graveyard, but have a graveyard set there that we've cleared out from back in the day. And then there's an old mine shaft kind of thing about the Dutchman and stuff, but it's where you go up to go gold panning. We like to bring the kids through there because it has kind of a closed in. I could see where it could be spooky. And I could see where going through there at night would be kind of, if you were unfamiliar with it, it'd be really strange. But do not know what he saw. He said he was adamant. He said those lights were out there almost every night. He said the last night they were there again, and he just wasn't going to bother because he figured after what he felt that last time, and the fact even in daylight he really didn't want to go back in there. He said, yeah, I'll get a hold of Wayne and ask Wayne what's the deal, because maybe that's a place you're not supposed to be. But as far as I know, there's no history, nothing, anything down in there. In fact, other than Randy Wright hearing the voices and some of the odd things down there, and Mike McChesney saying there was someone, I think, tapping on his window when he was sleeping in the truck once, well, all by himself up there. Most of the time, I've never heard anything in camp. Now, I will add this. When you consider how many people through the treks and things from the early 1930s to today have been out there and all the good memories and the people, if you want to believe in that kind of thing, I would think it's a feel-good thing, but the lights running around and people and thinking it was like kids running around with flashlights in the dark and stuff, I could see it like some sort of like imprint made of past treks. I mean, think of how many treks were held there since the 40s in that location. The Dons and all the people that have camped there and the events and everything that's been held there. Now, other people do use the site and will lease the site from the Dons to utilize for other things, but I've never heard anything really odd. And I've never encountered anything that I would, especially consecutive nights like that. So this year, maybe there's too many of us at the Dons camp, but I know a number of people that have stayed out there by themselves night after night after night and never have run into anything. So very curious, whatever he saw. I believed him that he thinks he really saw something there, and there must have been some lights. Who knows what the explanation is. So there you go, the mysterious lights of the Dons camp. We will see what happens when we go out and start getting things prepared and what we can stir up before everybody goes there. But I don't know if it would be something residual or who knows what it could possibly be. So thank you for the story, because I enjoyed listening to you and sharing with you. He's thinking coming to the rendezvous, so he does not want his identity given out. He felt kind of weird about the whole story in the system, but he is trying to plan a trip. So if he is there and he decides he wants to talk about this story and say, hey, yeah, that was me, that'll be very cool, and everybody can question him who's there or talk to him about it. But otherwise, we're going to just let it be and just wait till the rendezvous and see if he puts in an appearance. So thank you for joining us. Hope everybody has another great week. Our temperatures are coming down out of the 110s down in the low hundreds. So it's actually going to be just normal summer for a brief while. So thank you for joining us. Please again, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out the website. And until the next time, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.